Hey guys, it's Thorn. Um, I wanted to do a video more specifically about the stuff that I said in my last video and stuff that I've said previously about teaching and being a teacher because, um, people raised good points in comments and I started writing out replies and then it just didn't make sense because I thought, why don't I just make a video? Because I'm never really clear when I talk about teaching, and it's because I have really, really mixed feelings about teaching and people who call themselves teachers. And I should start by saying that mostly what I mean when I talk about this is the people out there who describe themselves as teachers of Wicca specifically. And but I guess I'll get there in a minute. So teaching, right, like there's all different kinds of teaching. I mean, I finished graduate school and I had a 2-year teaching fellowship where I functioned as a TA who periodically did some lecturing and was responsible for things like one-on-one contact with students, tutoring where necessary, hooking kids up with disability services, and mostly doing all of the one-on-one stuff, as well as all of the grading and, a handful of lectures each semester, plus taking over class and stuff like that when the professors are sick. So I had, I had a taste of teaching at the college level, essentially. And that to me has been a very different sort of experience than the work that I've been doing lately with regard to teaching as far as craft things are concerned, just because when you're at a university, there are very strict guidelines as far as what teaching looks like, what kind of material needs to be covered. The professor writes the syllabus, and there's influence from administration, etc. But everybody's pretty formulaic, even though the teacher's writing the syllabus, and they can for the most part, depending on tenure and that sort of thing, they can pretty much do what they want, but everybody follows the same kind of format. There's a lecture, there's various kinds of expectations that are established beforehand, there are exams, various kinds of testing. Your subject material might be unique, and you might have certain kinds of particular eccentricities as a professor, but generally speaking, everybody's doing the same kinds of things, I've found. And it works. It works to come in as a TA because you've been dealing with that system your whole life. You know it, even though you haven't necessarily been in front of the classroom at that point. You can step into it with relative ease, and there's already a path for you. And my experience thus far with pretty much anything dealing with pagan stuff has been that that's really not the case, especially when you're operating outside of a particular tradition. Now, the things that I'm doing with my outer court are in line with particular bodies of materials that I have through my tradition. So I'm not wandering in the dark, okay? But I think that there's even when we're talking about a university classroom setting, there's a really fine line between wanting to be a teacher because you think that you're dealing with a particular body of knowledge that is deserving of being passed on, like your devotion to a subject, and then the ties that we have to our egos and our sense of importance. And that's, again, university setting. That's rampant. You don't, in the humanities, generally speaking, you don't go and become a PhD because you want to be a teacher. You can teach with a master's degree. You can go to a community college. You can be a lecturer. You can be various kinds of adjuncts, whatever. People who get PhDs in religious studies, and I venture most of the other humanities, and probably a lot of the sciences too, they do it because they want to do original research. We care about our own shit. We want to write. We want to conduct our own research. We want to do our own studying. We want to work on us and our projects. But the way the system is set up, you just can't do that without also being a teacher. You're expected, depending on the university you're at, you're expected to take classes to teach undergraduates at the master's level and above. And once you have your PhD, unless you're independently wealthy, which, most of them aren't, your best bet is to get some kind of, if you're lucky, a tenure track job at another university where you will spend overwhelmingly the majority of your time teaching undergraduates and dealing with their undergraduate problems and not doing your own stuff unless you're a really good multitasker and, a highly skilled academic, which hopefully you are. And I've seen professors just really get off on having control of classes, and that can be good and that can be bad. If they're a skilled teacher, if they care about their subject and they care about their students, that can be a good thing. But there are definitely people out there who just want to impress a bunch of 18-year-olds, take advantage of their female students, and that stuff happens. I'm sure there's some male students taken advantage of, but I think by and large, that's not, anyway. Teaching is a kind of power, and power can be, power is kind of inherently problematic. And so when you're talking about any kind of spiritual setting that doesn't have the sorts of checks and balances that a university has in place, for example, eclectic Wicca, various kinds of paganisms that don't exist within established traditions that have structures in place for teaching, I think it gets even more dangerous, because what happens is anyone can read a whole bunch of books and either be on the internet or be in real life and set themselves up as a teacher, and they may or may not be qualified. And it's one thing if it's about love for the material and a desire to help other people. I think that's, generally speaking, pretty benign. It's not that I'm worried about people being taught wrong or taught the wrong things. It's just that I don't really understand the impulse to essentially have underlings, which is how a lot of these people talk, that you collect students the way you collect congregants or something like that. And I think that gets to be a problem, especially if you're operating independently. So I don't mean to disparage teachers and teaching. I ended up being a teacher somehow. I have very mixed feelings about that a lot of the time, just because my love is for the material itself. My love is for the subject. And I often wrestle with this idea over whether or not it's my responsibility to worry about what other people are doing. Why I often have to stop myself. And I mentioned this in my third major life lesson from my last video about how I think pagans, especially witches of various stripes, spend too much time worried about what other people are doing and worrying about whether or not other people are doing it wrong or whatever. And I still have these kinds of impulses. I get really irritated when people make sweeping statements about Wicca when they don't know what they're talking about. And when I say they don't know what they're talking about, I mean from my specific perspective, from my specific training and whatever. I'm coming from a particular place when I'm being bothered. And I have to stop and check myself, because my impulse is always to want to say something, whether it's directly to the person, whether it's to make a YouTube video or write a blog entry or do something in academic land or whatever. And I have to stop and ask, why do I care so much about what this other person is doing or what these other people are doing? And why does it bother me so much that there are people running around who I think have got it wrong? Why does that actually matter? Why is it my responsibility to correct anyone or to make sure that other people aren't misinformed. Like, I mean, like my particular branch of Wicca, values its secrecy and is generally pretty tight-lipped. Maybe it's to my advantage if everybody thinks that, Wicca is Satanism, or Wicca is stupid and everybody should just be traditional witches, and, Wicca's New Age and dumb. Like, maybe it's to my advantage. Maybe I should just, I wrestle with that. So, given that those kinds of thoughts occur to me, what business do I necessarily have purporting to be qualified to lead other people? So these are issues that I wrestle with, and I think there are a lot of people out there who aren't particularly thoughtful about what they're doing when they're teaching. Is it coming from a place of ego? Is it coming from a place of love for the subject, or love for the student, or I don't know, just I think there's a lot of ways that teaching can be, the first word that popped into my head was destructive, but I think that's too harsh. The relationship between a teacher and student is potentially one that has a very large power differential, and it's potentially one that has a lot of impact on both people involved in the relationship, or however many people are involved in the relationship. And I think there's a lot that can go wrong emotionally, I guess, if not religiously, because I don't even know what that would look like. And I just think that there are a lot of insensitive, egotistical people running around who are doing things just because they want someone on some level to validate their authority, to validate their practice of craft, to validate their whatever. And I think that just makes me a little sad. I was going to say it concerns me. I don't know. I don't even know if it's my business, but these are the kinds of things that I'm talking about when I get halfway into cups and start rambling about teaching and how, like, teacher, people setting themselves up. Like, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So I wanted to clarify, and I'd be really curious to hear other people's thoughts. How did you have some, like, if you, whatever you're doing, whether, like the Four Queens, she teaches tarot. Like, if you are teaching a particular kind of skill or a particular kind of spiritual practice, like, was there a point when you realized that this was something you wanted to do? Did it just sort of start happening? Like I feel like I just found myself in the position. Did you seek out to become a teacher of some stripe? And if you're not a teacher, like, what sorts of things about that kind of relationship might be appealing or aren't appealing, or I don't know, like, I think there are a lot of perspectives here that should be explored. So anyway, I hope you all are having a lovely day. Lovely day. Sorry, I'm tired, so speech difficult. Okay, bye.